I am Kiara, exactly 33 years old, and today is my 11th wedding anniversary. When I opened my eyes this morning, the cold light filtered through the heavy velvet curtains, casting long, mocking shadows across the bedroom floor. My head felt strangely exposed to the chilled air conditioning of our sprawling mansion, and my mind was clouded with a heavy, unnatural fog. I reached up to rub my aching temples, but instead of my thick natural curls, my fingers met bare smooth skin. I was completely bald. Panic seized my chest as I sat up quickly, my heart hammering furiously against my ribs. Black curls were scattered all across my white silk pillowcase like fallen leaves after a storm. Right in the center of the mess sat a pale yellow sticky note. I picked it up with trembling hands. The handwriting belonged to my husband Marcus. It read, "Now you look just as ridiculous as the person you really are." I stared at the paper, the malicious words burning into my mind. He wanted to break me. He wanted to shatter my confidence and leave me a trembling, insecure shell of a woman. But Marcus made one catastrophic miscalculation. He chose the exact day I was scheduled to transfer $20 million into his struggling company. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to outsmart someone who tried to destroy your spirit. The bedroom door swung open. Marcus stood there fully dressed in his custom-tailored Italian suit, casually adjusting the heavy gold watch on his left wrist. His expensive leather shoes sank into the imported rug as he stepped inside. He looked at me sitting amidst the ruins of my hair, and a sickeningly sweet smile spread across his handsome face. "Good morning, beautiful," he said, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Are you feeling any better?" I tried to speak, but my throat was painfully dry. The metallic taste of sleeping pills lingered heavily on my tongue. "You drugged me," I managed to whisper, my voice hoarse and broken. "You shaved my head." Marcus let out a dramatic sigh and walked over to the foot of the bed. "Kiara, please do not start this again," he said, shaking his head as if he were dealing with a petulant child. "We talked about this last night. You had another one of your manic episodes. You were screaming about how you needed a fresh start, and then you took the scissors to your own head. I tried to stop you, but you were completely out of control." I stared at him in pure disbelief. He was lying straight to my face, spinning a narrative of my mental instability with terrifying ease, painting himself as the long-suffering savior of a hysterical woman. We both knew I had not had a manic episode. I had gone to bed early after drinking the cup of chamomile tea he had so lovingly prepared for me. My memory of the night went completely black after that very first sip. "You are lying," I said, pushing the blankets off my legs. "I would never do this to myself." Marcus dropped the concerned husband act instantly. His eyes turned cold, calculating and utterly devoid of affection. "Does it really matter how it happened?" he asked, stepping closer to the bed. "The point is, you look like an absolute disaster, and we have the biggest anniversary gala of our lives tonight. Half of Atlanta high society will be there. Investors, politicians, people who actually matter. So you are going to put on that synthetic wig I left in your bathroom. You are going to smile, and you are going to act like the supportive, silent wife you are supposed to be." I clenched my fists, letting my nails dig deeply into my palms to keep myself grounded. "And if I refuse," I challenged. Marcus leaned down, resting his hands heavily on the mattress, trapping me in his shadow. "If you refuse, I will call the psychiatric hospital myself and tell them my wife is a danger to herself. They will lock you up, Kiara. And do not forget, we have a very important deadline today. I need you to authorize the transfer for the $20 million startup funds by 8 o'clock tonight. My sports brokerage firm desperately needs that capital injection to close our latest expansion deal. Do not let your little emotional breakdown ruin our financial future." He patted my cheek, a condescending gesture that made my skin crawl. "Be a good girl, get dressed and make the transfer. I will see you downstairs." He turned on his heel and strode out of the room, leaving the door wide open. I sat alone in the quiet bedroom, the sheer audacity of his manipulation washing over me in waves. For 11 years, I had played the role of the quiet, accommodating wife. When I dropped out of college at 22, Marcus and his wealthy family treated me like a charity case. They never missed an opportunity to remind me that I was nothing without the sterling family name protecting me. They thought I spent my days shopping at luxury boutiques and lounging idly by the country club pool, wasting my life away as nothing more than a silent trophy wife. They had absolutely no idea that behind the closed and locked doors of my private home office, I was constantly coding complex financial models. I spent a grueling decade building a highly classified predictive data algorithm that a major technology corporation had just purchased for a staggering $20 million. Marcus thought he had finally convinced me to invest that massive fortune into his failing business. He thought tearing down my self-esteem on the morning of our anniversary would make me compliant, desperate for his validation, and eager to buy his love. I stood up, my bare feet sinking into the plush carpet, and walked over to his side of the room. He had left his leather briefcase sitting slightly open on the mahogany armchair. Something metallic glinted inside the side pocket. I reached in and pulled it out. It was a pair of heavy-duty electric hair clippers, the exact kind used by professional barbers. The sharp steel blades were still heavily dusted with tiny black curls. My curls. He had not even bothered to clean them properly. A cold, sharp clarity settled over my mind completely, replacing the groggy confusion of the sleeping pills. This was not just a cruel prank. This was a calculated psychological attack. Marcus wanted me broken, hiding behind a cheap wig, feeling so ugly and insecure that I would hand over $20 million just to keep his approval. He wanted to own me completely. I gripped the heavy clippers in my hand, staring at my reflection in the full-length mirror. Without my hair, my cheekbones looked sharper, my jawline more defined, my eyes darker, and far more dangerous. I did not look like a victim. I looked like a woman who had nothing left to lose. I tossed the clippers back into his briefcase and walked into my bathroom. I ignored the cheap, shiny wig sitting on the marble counter. Instead, I picked up my phone and dialed the private number of my wealth manager. Marcus wanted his money by 8 o'clock tonight. He wanted a submissive wife to parade in front of Atlanta high society. He desperately needed me to be the invisible stepping stone for his massive ego. He honestly believed his petty cruelty would guarantee my absolute submission. He was going to get a performance tonight, all right. I would give him and his arrogant family a show they would remember for the rest of their miserable lives. I was going to burn his entire fake empire right to the ground, just not the way he scripted it. My eyes snapped open as the heavy dose of whatever he slipped into my nighttime tea finally began to wear off. The master bedroom of our sprawling Atlanta mansion was freezing. I reached a sluggish hand up to rub my aching temples, but my fingers slipped against smooth, bare skin. My breath caught in my throat. I sat up violently, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. My thick, beautiful, natural hair was gone. The dark curls were scattered across the crisp white sheets, a horrifying contrast that made my stomach churn. I snatched the yellow sticky note off my pillow. The handwriting was unmistakably his, Marcus. My handsome, charismatic, deeply narcissistic husband. For 11 years I had played the role of the quiet, supportive wife. When I dropped out of college at 22, Marcus and his wealthy family treated me like a charity case. His mother never missed an opportunity to remind me that I was a nobody who owed her lavish lifestyle entirely to the sterling family name. He paraded me around his elite social circles as a simple homemaker, acting like he rescued me from a life of poverty. He never knew that while he was out playing golf and running his sports brokerage firm into the ground, I was locked in my home office writing code. I spent the last decade building a highly classified predictive data algorithm. Just last month, a major tech corporation bought my algorithm for $20 million. Marcus thought it was a small startup fund I inherited from a distant relative. He begged me to transfer the money to him today to close a massive expansion deal. The heavy oak door creaked open. Marcus strolled into the bedroom impeccably dressed in a custom navy suit fastening his gold cufflinks. He paused at the foot of the bed, his dark eyes sweeping over my shaved head. A sickening, calculated look of pity washed over his face. "Kiara, sweetheart," he sighed, shaking his head. "I told you to take your medication. You had another one of your manic episodes last night." I stared at him, my blood turning to ice. "I do not have manic episodes, Marcus," I said, my voice trembling, but growing louder. "You drugged my tea. You shaved my head." He chuckled, a low, dismissive sound that echoed in the vast room. "Do not be hysterical," he said, walking over to his leather armchair to grab his briefcase. "You were screaming about needing a fresh start, grabbed the scissors, and went to town. I tried to stop you, but you were completely unhinged. Look at yourself. You are a mess." His gaslighting was flawless. He delivered the lie with such smooth conviction that anyone else might have doubted their own sanity. But I knew the truth. My mind was sharp despite the lingering fog of the drugs. "We have the country club gala tonight," Marcus continued, checking his reflection in the mirror. "Half of Atlanta will be there. Do not embarrass me. I left a wig on your bathroom counter. Put it on, fix your face, and make sure that bank transfer is authorized by 8 o'clock tonight. If that money is not in my account before my speech, I will call the hospital myself and have you committed for self-harm." He leaned down, his face inches from mine, smelling of expensive cologne and deceit. "Be a good, quiet wife today, Kiara. Do not ruin our future." He turned and walked out of the room, leaving the door wide open. I sat frozen amidst my severed hair, the absolute cruelty of his plan washing over me. He knew I was self-conscious. He knew his mother and his sister-in-law constantly scrutinized my appearance, whispering about my clothes and my background. By stripping me of my hair, he thought he was stripping me of my power. He wanted me desperate, hiding behind a cheap synthetic wig, eager to hand over $20 million just to keep his approval and avoid being thrown into a psychiatric ward. I pushed the heavy duvet aside and stood up. My bare feet sank into the plush carpet as I walked over to the armchair where he had left his things. He had taken his briefcase, but he had left his leather gym bag sitting on the floor. I nudged it with my foot and it tipped over. A pair of heavy-duty electric clippers spilled out onto the rug. The steel blades were still clogged with my dark hair. He had not even bothered to clean the evidence. A strange, eerie calm settled deep in my chest. I did not cry. I did not scream. I picked up the clippers and walked into the master bathroom, dropping them into the trash can. I looked at myself in the brightly lit vanity mirror. Without my hair, my features looked sharper, my jawline more defined. I did not look like the broken, submissive housewife Marcus wanted me to be. I looked like a woman who was about to burn an empire to the ground. I ignored the shiny, cheap wig sitting on the marble counter. Instead, I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the private number for my wealth manager, Elias. Marcus wanted his money by 8 o'clock. He wanted a silent, obedient wife to parade in front of his wealthy friends. He was going to get exactly what he asked for, but the price he would pay would be everything he owned. I picked up my phone from the cold marble counter. My hands were perfectly steady now. The initial shock of finding my hair scattered across the bed had entirely evaporated, replaced by a cold, calculating precision. I dialed a private, unlisted number I had memorized years ago. It rang twice before a crisp, professional voice answered. "Good morning, Kiara. I trust you are ready for the transfer," Elias asked. He was my wealth manager, a brilliant financial strategist, and one of the few people on Earth who actually knew the truth about my life. "Change of plans." "Elias," I said, staring directly at my reflection in the mirror. "Do not transfer the $20 million into Marcus's sports brokerage account. I need you to execute the alternative strategy we discussed last month." I could hear the slow, satisfied smile in Elias's voice. "I have been waiting 11 years to hear you say that. I will initiate the protocol immediately. The funds from the Oracle buyout are fully cleared and safely sitting in your anonymous venture capital trust." This was the massive secret I had guarded with my life. When Marcus and his arrogant family mocked me for being a college dropout, they never once bothered to ask why I actually dropped out. I did not fail my classes. I left because I realized the predictive data algorithm I was developing in my cramped dorm room was far too valuable to risk becoming university property. I spent the next decade perfecting that complex code, in secret hiding my relentless work behind the quiet facade of a clueless, submissive housewife. Just last month, Oracle purchased that exact algorithm known in the tech world as Sentinel for a staggering $20 million after taxes. Marcus thought this money was a surprise inheritance from a distant, wealthy relative. He thought I was just a lucky, naive woman who desperately needed her brilliant husband to manage her sudden wealth. He had absolutely no idea that I earned every single penny of it through my own sheer brilliance. Elias, I continued pacing across the smooth bathroom floor. I want you to use my venture capital firm to buy up all of Marcus's corporate debt. Every single loan his brokerage firm has taken out. Buy it from his banks, buy it from his private lenders. Pay whatever premium is necessary to expedite the paperwork. But I want to be the sole owner of his $15 million debt by 5 o'clock this evening. Consider it done, Elias replied without hesitation. By the time he gives his anniversary speech tonight, you will be his only senior secured creditor. He will owe you absolutely everything. Just as I ended the call, my phone screen flashed with an incoming call. The caller ID displayed a name that usually sent a spike of anxiety straight through my chest. Beatrice, my mother-in-law. I took a deep breath, slipping effortlessly back into the submissive character I had played for 11 long years, and answered the phone. "Good morning, Beatrice," I said, keeping my voice soft and accommodating. "Kiara, listen to me very carefully," Beatrice snapped, completely bypassing any basic greeting. Her voice was sharp, carrying that familiar tone of absolute authority she used to dominate everyone around her. "The photographer for the country club gala tonight is charging us an absolute fortune. He will be taking the official Sterling family portraits right before Marcus gives his speech. I need you to stand in the back row, preferably hidden behind Jamal and Chloe. Do you understand?" I looked at my completely shaved head in the mirror. "Stand in the back, Beatrice. But it is my anniversary, too." Beatrice let out a loud, theatrical sigh of frustration. "Do not be difficult today, Kiara. You know Marcus is on the verge of closing a massive expansion deal for his firm. The prestigious investors attending tonight expect a certain image. They expect elite, polished Atlanta high society. And let us be honest, your usual frumpy aesthetic does not exactly scream luxury. You always look so painfully plain. Just wear something dark, stay out of the center frame, and let Chloe shine. She actually knows how to properly represent the Sterling family name. Chloe, Marcus's sister-in-law. She was a woman who married Marcus's brother Jamal, and she never let anyone forget her privileged background. She constantly paraded around in expensive designer clothes paid for by her husband, looking down her nose at me because I preferred comfortable clothes and quiet evenings over toxic country club gossip. Beatrice adored Chloe, simply because Chloe looked the part of a perfect, obedient trophy wife. "I understand, Beatrice," I said, keeping my tone completely even. "I will make sure my appearance does not ruin your perfect family photos tonight. I promise you everyone will be looking at Marcus." "Good. See that you do," Beatrice snapped and abruptly ended the call. I lowered the phone from my ear and let out a genuine, unburdened laugh. Beatrice wanted me to hide in the shadows. Marcus wanted me to cower under a cheap synthetic wig. They both wanted me to remain entirely invisible so they could continue exploiting me to maintain their fragile fake empire. I walked back into the master bedroom and opened my expansive walk-in closet. I bypassed the modest, neutral-colored dresses Marcus usually picked out for me. I reached into the very back and pulled out a stunning floor-length crimson-red gown that I had bought for myself months ago in secret. It was bold, it was fierce, it was the exact color of absolute power. I spent the rest of the day meticulously preparing. I did not shed a single tear over my lost hair. Instead, I hired a private makeup artist to come to the house. I had her accentuate my eyes with sharp, dramatic lines and highlight my cheekbones. I paired the crimson gown with a pair of brilliant diamond earrings I had purchased with my first algorithmic patent dividend. When I finally looked in the mirror that evening, I did not recognize the woman staring back at me. The submissive, insecure housewife was completely gone. In her place stood the anonymous founder of Sentinel, a multimillionaire, a woman who was about to orchestrate the most devastating financial execution Atlanta high society had ever witnessed. I sent one final message to Elias instructing him to execute Protocol Debt Trap immediately. The legal documents confirming my complete ownership of Marcus's entire corporate debt were ready. I grabbed my designer clutch, slipped the folded legal documents safely inside, and walked out the front door. The ride to the country club felt incredibly short. When my black luxury SUV pulled up to the grand entrance of the elite venue, the valet rushed forward to open my door. I stepped out into the warm evening air. I took a deep breath, feeling the cool breeze against my bare scalp. I held my head high, adjusting the crimson silk of my gown, and walked straight through the massive glass doors. I was ready to step into the lion's den. The heavy glass doors swung open, and the vibrant hum of the country club ballroom instantly died. It was as if the air had been sucked completely out of the room. The string quartet in the corner missed a beat, the cellist staring openly as I walked inside. Hundreds of pairs of eyes turned toward me. The elite of Atlanta high society, dressed in their finest tuxedos and designer gowns, stood frozen in absolute shock. I did not shrink under their gaze. I walked with slow, deliberate steps, my crimson silk gown flowing behind me like a river of blood. My completely bald head caught the glow of the massive crystal chandeliers above. I could hear the sharp gasps and the frantic, hushed whispers rippling through the crowd. They were expecting the quiet, frumpy wife hiding in the background. Instead, they got a woman who looked like she owned the entire building. My mother-in-law, Beatrice, was standing near the grand staircase. Her jaw actually dropped, and the color drained rapidly from her face. But before she could even mobilize to attack me, someone else stepped directly into my path. It was Chloe. My husband's sister-in-law positioned herself perfectly to block my way. She held a crystal flute of expensive champagne, her toxic practice smile plastered across her flawless face. The camera angle of my life felt like it shifted right over my shoulder, capturing her condescending sneer in high definition. "Oh my goodness, Kiara," Chloe announced, her voice pitched artificially loud, so that every wealthy investor standing nearby could hear every single word. "Look at you. We were all so worried when Marcus told us about your little mental breakdown this morning, but I never imagined you would actually come out in public looking like this." I stopped walking and looked at her. Chloe was the picture of white privilege, wrapped in new money arrogance, draped in a stunning silver gown. Around her neck sat a blindingly bright, incredibly intricate diamond necklace that caught every light in the room. "Are you sure you should be here?" Chloe continued, tilting her head with fake, sickening sympathy. "I mean, Marcus has always been so particular about appearances. We all know he has always preferred European beauty standards anyway. It must be so exhausting for you constantly trying to measure up and then just completely snapping under the pressure. You should really go home and rest before you embarrass him any further on his big night." She took a slow sip of her champagne, her eyes raking over my bald scalp with absolute disgust. "Jamal bought me this gorgeous piece just this morning to celebrate the company expansion," she added, reaching up to touch the heavy diamonds resting against her collarbone. "He says a successful man needs a wife who actually knows how to reflect his wealth. Perhaps you could learn a thing or two from us, Kiara, if you ever recover from this little episode of yours." I did not flinch. I let her words hang in the tense air, allowing the surrounding guests to soak in her blatant cruelty. I looked down at the necklace. It was a Boucheron original, a masterpiece of diamonds and white gold. "It was a beautiful piece of jewelry, Chloe," I said, keeping my voice perfectly calm and measured. "Jamal has wonderful taste. Though I have to admit, I find it quite fascinating that Jamal would buy you an $80,000 necklace on a Tuesday morning using a corporate credit card that does not belong to his medical practice." Chloe's fake smile twitched. Her hand froze against the diamonds. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice losing a fraction of its volume. "Jamal bought this for me. He surprised me with it." "Did he?" I asked, taking a single step closer to her. Because I happen to know for a fact that the charge for that specific Boucheron necklace cleared yesterday afternoon, and it was not billed to Jamal's private account. It was billed directly to the Apex Sports Brokerage Executive Card, the same corporate card your brother-in-law, my husband, uses for his so-called business expenses. I tilted my head, mirroring her earlier patronizing gesture. It makes me wonder, Chloe. Why would Marcus use his company funds to buy an $80,000 diamond necklace for his brother's wife? The color completely drained from Chloe's face. The smug, condescending sneer was instantly replaced by sheer, unadulterated panic. Her eyes darted frantically around the room to see if anyone had heard my question. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. For a split second, the polished, arrogant facade shattered, revealing the terrified, guilty woman hiding underneath. She knew that I knew. She realized in that exact moment that her secret affair with my husband was not a secret at all. Before Chloe could formulate a lie to save herself, a heavy hand clamped on my shoulder. I was suddenly yanked backward with terrifying force. It was Marcus. His handsome face was contorted with raw panic and explosive rage. He had seen the confrontation and stormed over to us. "What the hell do you think you are doing?" he hissed directly into my ear. His fingers dug deeply into my bare waist. His grip so viciously tight I could feel the bruises instantly beginning to form against my ribs. "You did not put the wig on. You are making a massive scene. I warned you about this, Kiara." He did not give me a chance to answer. He turned to the staring crowd and flashed a brilliant, entirely fake smile. "Please excuse my wife, ladies and gentlemen," Marcus announced smoothly. "She is feeling a little overwhelmed by the crowd tonight. I'm just going to take her to the VIP area so she can sit down and catch her breath." He tightened his bruising grip, shoving me forcefully toward the dark and secluded hallway. The heavy velvet curtains of the VIP corridor swallowed the music from the ballroom the moment Marcus dragged me through them. The sudden silence in the narrow hallway was deafening, broken only by his heavy, furious breathing and the sharp click of my heels dragging across the polished hardwood floor. The heavy bass of the string quartet playing modern R&B faded into absolute nothingness, isolating us in this gilded cage. He did not let go of my waist. His fingers were like iron vices, meant to punish, meant to establish physical dominance. Instead of releasing me gently, he spun me around with a violent jerk, slamming my bare back hard against the cold, silk-lined wall. I remained entirely impassive. I looked up at the man I had called my husband for 11 long years. The charming, charismatic smile he always used to win over his wealthy investors was completely gone. In its place was a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. His dark eyes were wide and frantic, the veins in his neck bulging visibly against the tight collar of his custom tuxedo. He leaned in so close I could feel the heat of his breath on my face, smelling sharply of expensive scotch and absolute desperation. "What the hell do you think you are doing, Kiara?" He spat, his voice dropping to a vicious, venomous whisper. "You walk in here looking like an absolute freak, and then you start cornering Chloe about company finances. Are you actively trying to destroy my life tonight?" I did not break eye contact. I did not struggle against his bruising grip on my arms. I just stared at him, marveling at how easily his flawless facade crumbled the second his money was threatened. "I am simply making conversation, Marcus," I replied, my voice completely steady and utterly devoid of fear. My heart was beating in a slow, rhythmic cadence entirely unaffected by his pathetic display of physical dominance. "Is it my fault Chloe gets so incredibly defensive when someone asks a simple question about her new diamonds?" Marcus pressed his forearm against my collarbone, pinning me tighter against the wall to restrict my movement. "Do not play games with me tonight," he hissed. "I do not care about your petty jealousy over Chloe. I do not care about your little cries for attention. The only thing I care about right now is whether or not you did what I told you to do this morning. Did you authorize the bank transfer?" I watched the sheer panic swimming in the depths of his eyes. He was terrified. His sports brokerage firm Apex was drowning in $15 million of toxic debt. And he knew that without my $20 million injection, his entire fake empire would collapse by tomorrow morning. He desperately needed my money to pay off the massive loans he had taken out to fund his secret affair and his lavish, fraudulent lifestyle. You have exactly 30 minutes until I go out on that stage to give my anniversary speech. Marcus continued, his tone turning dangerously low and demanding. I need to stand in front of my elite investors and assure them that our expansion capital is fully secured. So I am going to ask you one more time, Kiara. Is the $20 million sitting in my account? I tilted my chin up, refusing to shrink away from him. And if it is not, I asked softly, what will you do? Marcus. Drug me again. Shave my eyebrows this time. Marcus let out a harsh, cruel laugh that sent a chill down the hallway. I will do much worse than that, he promised, leaning in until his nose almost brushed mine. If that money is not cleared and sitting in my corporate account by the time I take that microphone, I will file for divorce first thing tomorrow morning. I will take this mansion. I will take the luxury cars. And I will leave you on the streets with absolutely nothing. And you know what else I will do? I will call the chief of psychiatry at Atlanta General Hospital. I will tell them my highly unstable wife had a severe manic break, shaved her own head, and started hallucinating about corporate embezzlement at a high society gala. I will make sure the doctors keep you heavily medicated. You will be trapped in a sterile white room while I spend your little fortune. They will lock you in a padded room so fast your head will spin. He reached up and tapped his index finger hard against my bare scalp. Look at yourself, Kiara. Who do you think a judge is going to believe? The successful, well-respected CEO, or the hysterical bald dropout who cannot even hold a simple conversation without creating a massive public spectacle? You are nothing without me. You have always been nothing without me. Do not force me to destroy you. I will break you into so many pieces that you will spend the rest of your pathetic life begging for my forgiveness. He snarled, his eyes dark and merciless. He stepped back, smoothing down the lapels of his suit jacket, attempting to quickly regain his composure. He checked his heavy gold Rolex, his jaw ticking with intense impatience. You have 30 minutes, he ordered. Show me the confirmation screen right now, or I make the phone call that ends your freedom forever. I stood there against the wall, taking a slow, deep breath. He really thought he had won. He really believed his aggressive threats of poverty and psychiatric wards would make me crumble into a weeping, obedient mess. He thought the patriarchal power he wielded in this city would always protect him from any real consequence. I slowly reached into the small, hidden pocket of my crimson gown and pulled out my phone. I tapped the screen a few times, navigating past my real banking applications, and opened the decoy financial dashboard I had Elias programmed specifically for this exact moment. It was a perfect, flawless replica of a bank transfer confirmation page. I held the glowing screen up to his face. The fake document clearly displayed a completed wire transfer of $20 million routed directly into the Apex corporate holding account. Marcus stared at the screen. I watched the thick tension instantly melt out of his broad shoulders. A massive wave of relief washed over his features, quickly replaced by that familiar, deeply arrogant smirk. He let out a long, satisfied breath, running a hand over his freshly lined-up haircut. He thought he had successfully bullied me into funding his endless lies. He thought he owned me completely. He thought 11 years of conditioning had successfully erased my ability to fight back. Good girl, he whispered, reaching out to condescendingly pat my cheek. I knew you would finally come to your senses. Now stay out of sight until I call you up to the stage. Try to look incredibly grateful. Marcus turned around and strode back toward the heavy ballroom doors, completely unaware that he had just handed me the match to light the fuse. He walked away with the swagger of a king, blind to the financial execution awaiting him. I slipped my phone back into my pocket, smoothing out the silk of my crimson dress. I looked at his retreating back and whispered into the empty hallway. Do not worry, honey. I am about to give you exactly what you deserve tonight. I waited exactly 2 minutes in that suffocating hallway before following Marcus back out into the grand ballroom. The heavy velvet curtains parted and the blinding glow of the crystal chandeliers washed over me once again. Ahead of me, Marcus was already making his way toward the main stage. The camera angle smoothly transitioned into a tracking shot from behind, following his broad shoulders as he soaked in the adulation of the crowd. People clapped, raised their expensive champagne flutes, and shouted words of congratulations. He waved at the elite African American Society of Atlanta, playing the role of the triumphant self-made billionaire to absolute perfection. He was completely in his element, feeding off their admiration like a parasite. He bounded up the short staircase to the stage, his custom navy tuxedo catching the bright spotlight. The string quartet stopped playing. The room fell into an expectant, respectful silence. Marcus tapped the microphone twice, cleared his throat, and flashed his signature charismatic smile. "Good evening, everyone," he began, his rich baritone voice echoing through the massive venue. "Thank you all for joining us tonight to celebrate 11 years of marriage and, of course, the incredibly bright future of my sports brokerage firm, Apex." The crowd erupted into polite applause. I stood near the edge of the stage, remaining perfectly still in my crimson gown, waiting for my cue. Marcus held up his hands, gesturing for quiet. He put on a face of deep, manufactured sincerity. "As many of you know, building an empire requires sacrifice." He continued, his tone shifting to something sickeningly somber. "It requires a strong foundation. And for the past 11 years, I have been the foundation for my fragile but deeply loyal wife, Kiara." I watched from the shadows as a collective murmur of synthetic sympathy swept through the wealthy investors and their wives. He was actually doing it. He was using the bald head he had forced upon me to elevate his own public image. "Kiara has been going through some very challenging personal health struggles lately," Marcus said, lowering his voice to sound choked with emotion. "As you can see tonight, her journey has been difficult. But a real man stands by his wife when she is broken. A real man protects her from the world and from herself. I love you, Kiara, and I will always be your ultimate savior." He raised his crystal glass high into the air. The audience actually let out a collective touching sigh. Some of the women even dabbed at their eyes. It was a masterful, manipulative performance. He had painted me as a weak, hysterical burden, and himself as the ultimate patient hero. Just as he brought the glass toward his lips to seal the toast, I moved. In a sudden, rapid whip pan, I stepped out of the shadows and walked directly up the stage stairs. My footsteps were completely silent, but my presence commanded the immediate attention of every single person in the room. I stepped up right behind him. Before his arrogant brain could even register my proximity, I reached out and smoothly slid the microphone straight out of his hand. Marcus froze. The glass of champagne stopped inches from his mouth. He turned his head slowly, his eyes widening in absolute horror as he realized I was not standing in the back row like a submissive victim. I was standing center stage, directly in the spotlight, looking more powerful than he ever could. "What are you doing?" he hissed under his breath, his fake smile straining so hard it looked painful. "Give that back." I ignored him completely and turned to face the crowd. "Good evening, Atlanta," I said. My voice rang out clear, confident, and sharp, lacking any trace of the fragility he had just described. Down on the main floor, the panic began. My mother-in-law Beatrice realized immediately that something was terribly wrong. I watched from the stage as she frantically pushed her way through the crowd in her tight designer dress. She locked eyes with the sound technician standing at the mixing board in the back corner of the room. She began wildly waving her arms, dragging her finger across her throat in a desperate, frantic signal to cut my microphone. She mouthed the words, turn it off, right now." The sound technician reached for the master volume slider, but he never made it. Two towering men in sharp black suits stepped smoothly out of the crowd and positioned themselves directly in front of the soundboard. They were the private security detail I had hired earlier that afternoon. They crossed their arms and simply stared down the technician. He immediately backed away, raising his hands in surrender. Beatrice ran up to the security guards, screaming at them to move, but they stood like solid brick walls. The microphone stayed live. My voice remained perfectly amplified. Total control of the room now belonged entirely to me. I smiled at the hundreds of shocked faces staring up at me. "Thank you all for that very touching round of applause," I announced, gripping the microphone firmly. Marcus is absolutely right. Building an empire does require immense sacrifice. But he was slightly confused about who was actually making the sacrifices and who was secretly draining the bank accounts. The murmuring in the crowd intensified. Marcus stepped toward me, his hands twitching desperately, wanting to physically drag me off the stage, but trapped by the very audience he wanted to impress. He could not attack me in front of his major investors without destroying his image. "We are gathered here to celebrate the future of Apex." I continued, my voice echoing off the high vaulted ceilings. "Marcus has told you all about his brilliant expansion plans. He has promised you massive returns on your investments. But what kind of loyal wife would I be if I let you all blindly throw your hard-earned money into a blazing fire without seeing the full picture first?" I turned slightly to look Marcus dead in the eye. The sheer terror radiating from his face was intoxicating. He was completely paralyzed. I looked back at the investors, my crimson gown glowing under the spotlight. "Tonight," I said, "Marcus and I have a very special anniversary surprise for all of his esteemed investors. We thought it would be deeply educational to skip the empty champagne toasts and instead take a highly detailed, extremely deep dive into the real unfiltered finances of his sports brokerage firm, Apex." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small remote control. "Let us look at the real numbers, shall we?" I pressed the button on my remote. Behind us, the projector flickered to life, casting a glaring light across the stage. The screen did not display the promotional video Marcus prepared. Instead, it projected authentic internal bank statements from Apex. I watched the camera push in on the faces of the wealthy investors. The expectant smiles they wore seconds ago dropped from their faces. The room turned to ice. Wealthy men leaned forward, squinting at the glaring red numbers on the screen. Their wives covered their mouths in shock. "This is the real Apex," I announced, my voice steady so every syllable hit them like a blow. "What you are looking at is not a thriving firm on the verge of expansion. You are looking at a sinking ship drowning in $15 million of toxic corporate debt." Marcus let out a strangled sound beside me. He took a step forward, his hands trembling, but the magnitude of his public exposure kept him frozen. He was trapped like a deer in headlights. I paced slowly across the stage, making sure my gown commanded their attention. "Let us break these numbers down." I continued, pointing to the highlighted sections. "For 3 years, Marcus has been promising you unprecedented returns on your capital. He sold you a vision of elite sports contracts and high-yield endorsements. But the truth is far more criminal. Apex has not generated a single dollar of profit in 36 months. Every investment dividend paid out over the last 2 years was not generated by successful business deals. It was paid using fresh capital injected by new investors." A loud gasp swept across the room. Several men stood up from their tables, their faces twisting with sudden anger. "That is right," I said, nodding toward a furious investor in the second row. "Marcus has been running a glorified Ponzi scheme. He has been taking your hard-earned money and using it to artificially inflate his balance sheets while draining the corporate accounts to fund his lavish lifestyle." I clicked the remote again. The screen shifted to a new slide displaying a comparison of investor deposits and immediate outbound wire transfers. I read the numbers aloud, letting the devastating reality sink in. When the Henderson Group wired $2 million for the Miami expansion project, that money did not go to Florida. It went directly to a private offshore account to pay off a massive gambling debt Marcus accrued in the Bahamas. When the Vanguard Trust invested $3 million for stadium naming rights, Marcus used a shell company to funnel those funds into purchasing 3 luxury sports cars and a private yacht lease. "Lies!" Marcus suddenly screamed, his voice cracking with desperation. He threw his hands out toward the audience, his charming facade completely shattered into jagged pieces. "Do not listen to her. She is sick. She forged these documents because she is having a psychotic break. I swear to you, all these numbers are fabricated." I did not even look at him. I simply pressed the remote again. The screen flashed with a series of certified audit reports, complete with the official seals of the financial institutions Marcus used to hide his tracks. If these documents are forged, I challenged him. Then I am sure the federal bank auditors who signed off on these exact reports this morning would love to hear your theory. I have provided digital copies of every ledger to the phones of the top 5 investors in this room. You can verify the routing numbers yourselves. I watched as several men frantically pulled out their phones, checking their inboxes. The silence in the room was replaced by a rising wave of furious muttering. The elite facade of the Sterling family was disintegrating right before my eyes. All the years they spent mocking my quiet nature, all the times they called me a stupid college dropout, were finally coming full circle. I was using the very brain they underestimated to dismantle their entire world brick by brick. "You have been stealing from us," a voice shouted from the back of the room. Marcus was sweating profusely now. The bright stage lights illuminated the sheer terror pooling in his dark eyes. He looked at his mother Beatrice, who was still standing near the soundboard, completely paralyzed by the unfolding disaster. He looked at his brother Jamal, who was staring at the screen in absolute disbelief. Marcus had nowhere to run, and no one left to manipulate. He turned back to me, his chest heaving. "You vicious, crazy woman!" he hissed, his face contorting into a mask of violent rage. "I will kill you for this." He lunged for the microphone, his large hands reaching out to grab me violently by the throat. But I had heavily anticipated his sudden aggressive physical reaction. I easily sidestepped his clumsy, desperate attack, allowing his own unchecked momentum to completely carry him past me. He stumbled awkwardly across the wide stage, nearly tripping over the heavy metal microphone stand and crashing into the heavy velvet curtains. While he scrambled wildly to regain his footing and save his dignity, I turned back to the stunned audience with a cold, perfectly triumphant smile resting on my lips. I pressed the silver button on my remote one more deliberate time. The massive glowing projector screen behind us transitioned smoothly to the next slide, revealing a highly detailed binding legal document stamped by the county clerk. And for his ultimate final trick, I announced, my voice slicing sharply through the rising, dangerous chaos of the angry, shouting crowd. "Marcus has not only been selfishly stealing your hard-earned money to buy luxury yachts and expensive imported sports cars. He has also been pathetically desperate for fast cash, just to keep this entire crumbling financial illusion afloat. So incredibly desperate, in fact, that he completely secretly mortgaged the very mansion we are all currently standing in tonight. Not just once, but exactly twice." The gasps from the audience had not even faded before the sharp clicking of high heels pierced the stunned silence of the ballroom. A crash zoom captured Beatrice, my mother-in-law, violently pushing her way through the paralyzed crowd of wealthy investors. Her face was contorted into a mask of absolute, unhinged fury. The elegant, refined persona she had spent decades cultivating was entirely gone, replaced by a desperate, cornered predator. She scrambled up the wooden stairs of the stage with a surprising amount of speed for a woman wearing a heavy designer gown and 4-inch heels. Before I could fully turn my body to face her, Beatrice lunged at me. She reached out with her manicured hands, her acrylic nails digging viciously into my bare arm as she attempted to physically yank me away from the center of the stage. "You little tramp!" she screamed, her voice cracking with raw panic. "Get off this stage right now." I stood completely rooted to my spot, my posture unbroken. My private security guards immediately stepped forward to intercept her, but I simply raised my free hand, signaling them to stand down. I wanted the elite African American Society of Atlanta to see exactly who the matriarch of the Sterling family really was. I easily twisted my arm out of her bruising grip, smoothing down the crimson silk of my gown with a calm, deliberate motion. Realizing she could not physically move me, Beatrice frantically scanned the stage and snatched a backup microphone from a nearby audio stand. She turned to the audience, her chest heaving as she gripped the microphone with trembling hands. "Do not listen to a single word this woman is saying," Beatrice shrieked into the mic, her voice echoing shrilly across the cavernous country club ballroom. The feedback whined loudly, making several guests wince and cover their ears. She is a liar. These documents on the screen are entirely fake. They are the fabricated, pathetic delusions of a deeply unwell woman. I watched her unravel, completely unfazed by her frantic performance. Beatrice paced back and forth across the stage, frantically trying to regain control of the crumbling narrative. "Look at her," Beatrice yelled, pointing a shaking finger directly at my bald head. "Look at how erratic she is. My son Marcus has spent the last 11 years sacrificing his own happiness to take care of this unstable, uneducated girl. She is a college dropout. She failed out of school, and my son took pity on her. He gave her a home, he gave her the Sterling family name, and he gave her a life of luxury she never could have achieved on her own." The audience murmured, a few uncertain faces looking back and forth between the glaring financial documents on the projector screen and Beatrice's desperate theatrical defense. She saw the hesitation in the crowd and immediately doubled down, pouring even more venom into her words. "She is nothing but a gold digger," Beatrice continued, her voice dripping with absolute disgust. "She has been secretly stealing money from Marcus for over a decade, siphoning funds from his hard-earned success to buy herself designer clothes and hide her own financial failures. She is trying to destroy his spotless reputation tonight because she is suffering from severe female hysteria." I stood perfectly still under the bright stage lights. I let her scream. I let her hurl every classist demeaning insult she had stored up in her toxic mind for the past 11 years. I did not interrupt her tirade. I simply let the silence of the room amplify her unhinged desperation. The more she yelled, the more the wealthy guests began to look at her with visible discomfort. They were highly intelligent financial investors, and they knew that shouting insults did not erase the very real, authenticated bank routing numbers glowing in bright red on the massive screen behind us. When Beatrice finally paused to catch her breath, panting heavily into the microphone, I took a slow, measured step toward her. The camera angle remained fixed on her terrified, flushed face as my shadow fell over her. I raised my own microphone to my lips. My voice was dangerously calm, slicing through the tense, heavy air of the ballroom like a freshly sharpened blade. "You paint a very compelling picture, Beatrice," I said, making sure my tone was loud enough for every person in the very back of the room to hear. "A tragic story of a generous, wealthy family victimized by a poor, uneducated college dropout. It is a fantastic narrative. It really is. But there is a glaring, undeniable hole in your dramatic little story." Beatrice glared at me, her chest still heaving, her knuckles turning white as she gripped her microphone. "You have no proof of anything," she hissed, though her voice wavered slightly. I tilted my head, looking down at her with a cold, unforgiving smile. "If I am truly a broke, uneducated charity case who relies entirely on Marcus for my survival?" I asked, my voice echoing off the high ceilings. "Then I have a very serious question for you. Who exactly do you think paid off the Internal Revenue Service when your luxury bridal boutique was hit with a massive, crippling federal tax audit last year?" The entire ballroom went completely, devastatingly quiet. The color drained from Beatrice's face so fast she looked like she might actually faint. Her mouth fell open, but absolutely no sound came out at all. I took another slow step forward, closing the distance between us until I was standing merely inches away from her trembling frame. "You owe the federal government over $450,000 in back taxes because you had been illegally hiding your retail profits in offshore accounts to maintain your fake high society lifestyle. You came crying to Marcus, begging him to save you from prison," I said, ensuring the microphone caught every single devastating and humiliating syllable. The gasps from the audience had not even faded before the sharp clicking of high heels pierced the stunned silence of the ballroom. A rapid crash. Zoom captures Beatrice, my mother-in-law, as she violently pushes her way through the paralyzed crowd of wealthy investors. Her face was contorted into a mask of absolute, unhinged fury. The elegant, refined persona she had spent decades cultivating was entirely gone, replaced by a desperate, cornered predator. She scrambled up the wooden stairs of the stage, with a surprising amount of speed for a woman wearing a heavy designer gown and 4-inch heels. Before I could fully turn my body to face her, Beatrice lunged at me. She reached out with her manicured hands, her acrylic nails digging viciously into my bare arm as she attempted to physically yank me away from the center of the stage. "You little tramp!" she screamed, her voice cracking with raw panic. "Get off this stage right now!" I stood completely rooted to my spot, my posture unbroken, my private security. Guards immediately stepped forward to intercept her, but I simply raised my free hand, signaling them to stand down. I wanted the elite African American Society of Atlanta to see exactly who the matriarch of the Sterling family really was. I easily twisted my arm out of her bruising grip, smoothing down the crimson silk of my gown with a calm, deliberate motion. Realizing she could not physically move me, Beatrice frantically scanned the stage and snatched a backup microphone from a nearby audio stand. She turned to the audience, her chest heaving as she gripped the microphone with trembling hands. "Do not listen to a single word this woman is saying," Beatrice shrieked into the mic, her voice echoing shrilly across the cavernous country club ballroom. The feedback whined loudly, making several guests wince and cover their ears. "She is a liar. These documents on the screen are entirely fake. They are the fabricated, pathetic delusions of a deeply unwell woman." I watched her unravel, completely unfazed by her frantic performance. Beatrice paced back and forth across the stage, frantically trying to regain control of the crumbling narrative. "Look at her!" Beatrice yelled, pointing a shaking finger directly at my bald head. "Look at how erratic she is. My son Marcus has spent the last 11 years sacrificing his own happiness to take care of this unstable, uneducated girl. She is a college dropout. She failed out of school, and my son took pity on her. He gave her a home. He gave her the Sterling family name, and he gave her a life of luxury she never could have achieved on her own." The audience murmured, a few uncertain faces looking back and forth between the glaring financial documents on the projector screen and the desperate theatrical defense of Beatrice. She saw the hesitation in the crowd and immediately doubled down, pouring even more venom into her words. "She is nothing but a gold digger." Beatrice continued, her voice dripping with absolute disgust. "She has been secretly stealing money from Marcus for over a decade, siphoning funds from his hard-earned success to buy herself designer clothes and hide her own financial failures. She is trying to destroy his spotless reputation tonight because she is suffering from severe female hysteria." I stood perfectly still under the bright stage lights. I let her scream. I let her hurl every classist, demeaning insult she had stored up in her toxic mind for the past 11 years. I did not interrupt her tirade. I simply let the silence of the room amplify her unhinged desperation. The more she yelled, the more the wealthy guests began to look at her with visible discomfort. They were highly intelligent financial investors, and they knew that shouting insults did not erase the very real, authenticated bank routing numbers glowing in bright red on the massive screen behind us. When Beatrice finally paused to catch her breath, panting heavily into the microphone, I took a slow, measured step toward her. The camera angle remained fixed on her terrified, flushed face as my shadow fell over her. I raised my own microphone to my lips. My voice was dangerously calm, slicing through the tense, heavy air of the ballroom like a freshly sharpened blade. "You paint a very compelling picture, Beatrice," I said, making sure my tone was loud enough for every person in the very back of the room to hear. "A tragic story of a generous, wealthy family victimized by a poor, uneducated college dropout. It is a fantastic narrative. It really is. But there is a glaring, undeniable hole in your dramatic little story." Beatrice glared at me, her chest still heaving, her knuckles turning white as she gripped her microphone. "You have no proof of anything," she hissed, though her voice wavered slightly. I tilted my head, looking down at her with a cold, unforgiving smile. "If I am truly a broke, uneducated charity case, who relies entirely on Marcus for my survival?" I asked, my voice echoing off the high ceilings. "Then I have a very serious question for you. Who exactly do you think paid off the Internal Revenue Service when your luxury bridal boutique was hit with a massive, crippling federal tax audit last year, the entire ballroom went devastatingly quiet. The color drained from the face of Beatrice. Fast, she looked like she might actually faint. Her mouth fell open, but no sound came out at all. I took another slow step forward, closing the distance between us until I was standing merely inches away from her trembling frame. You owe the federal government over $450,000 in back taxes because you had been illegally hiding your retail profits in offshore accounts to maintain your fake high society lifestyle. You came crying to Marcus, begging him to save you from prison, I said, ensuring the microphone caught every single word. You came crying to Marcus, begging him to save you from prison, I said, ensuring the microphone caught every single word. Beatrice stumbled backward, as if she had been physically struck by an invisible force. The heavy jewel-encrusted clutch she was holding slipped from her grasp and hit the hardwood stage with a loud clatter that echoed through the silent room. She looked desperately out into the sea of faces, searching for a single sympathetic expression among her elite peers, but she found absolutely none. The wealthy investors of Atlanta high society were brutal when they smelled financial weakness, and federal tax fraud was the ultimate social poison. Beatrice covered her face with her shaking hands and scrambled awkwardly down the stage stairs, completely humiliated and stripped of her matriarchal power. A slow pan sweeps over the aggressively murmuring crowd, capturing the shocked, disgusted faces of the elite guests who were already whispering about severing ties with the Sterling family. The camera then lands directly on Chloe. She was standing near the front row, clutching her crystal champagne flute so tightly her knuckles were stark white against the delicate glass. Chloe realized that the Sterling family empire was collapsing in real time, and she needed to act fast to protect her own privileged lifestyle. She set her glass down on a passing waiter's tray and stepped forward, determined to play the ultimate peacemaker. Chloe climbed the steps to the stage, her silver designer gown shimmering elegantly under the bright spotlight. She adjusted her features into a mask of deep, profound sorrow. She deployed her ultimate weapon immediately, letting a few delicate, perfectly timed tears well up in her bright blue eyes. She walked toward me with her hands outstretched, palms open like she was approaching a frightened, dangerous animal. "Please, everyone," Chloe called out, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion. "I am so incredibly sorry you all have to witness this tonight." She stepped up to my side and reached out, placing a gentle, comforting hand on my bare shoulder. I could feel the icy chill of her heavy diamond rings pressing into my warm skin. "Kiara is clinically unwell," Chloe announced, projecting her voice out to the audience while adopting a deeply patronizing tone. "We have been trying to get her the psychiatric help she so desperately needs for months now. She has been suffering from severe delusions and terrifying paranoid episodes. This entire display tonight, these fake documents on the screen, are just the tragic result of a woman who has completely lost her grip on reality." Chloe tightened her grip on my shoulder, her manicured nails digging sharply into my collarbone as she tried to physically turn me away from the audience. She leaned in close, pressing her cheek against mine to make it look like a comforting, loving embrace to the spectators below. But her whisper was laced with pure, toxic venom, meant only for my ears. "You are embarrassing yourself, you pathetic ghetto trash," Chloe hissed, her breath hot against my ear. "Did you really think you could walk into our civilized world and destroy us with a few fake spreadsheets? You are nothing but a bald, ugly nobody. Put the microphone down right now and walk out the back door before I have security drag you out by your neck. You are ruining my perfect family image." She pulled back and instantly replaced her vicious scowl with that same sickeningly sweet, sympathetic smile for the crowd. Jamal, her husband, was watching from the front row, looking confused, but trusting his wife to handle the situation. "It is okay, Kiara," Chloe cooed loudly, patting my arm for everyone to see. "We are going to get you safely to a hospital. Marcus loves you so much, and it breaks his heart to see you acting out like this, just because you are jealous. You have always been so incredibly jealous of his massive success. And we know you have always been deeply envious of the perfect marriage Jamal and I share. It is okay to feel inadequate, but you cannot destroy our lives just because you are unhappy with your own. I did not let her guide me off the stage. I planted my feet firmly clad in my crimson heels and stood my ground like a marble statue. I looked at Chloe, her fake tears glistening under the stage lights, her $80,000 Boucheron necklace sitting heavily on her chest. Then I lifted my microphone directly to my mouth, and I laughed. It was not a quiet, polite chuckle. It was a loud, sharp, unapologetic laugh that boomed through the high-tech sound system of the massive ballroom. The sound technician was still blocked by my security guards, so he could not adjust the audio levels to cut me off. My laughter echoed against the high, vaulted ceilings, instantly creating a piercing, high-pitched feedback loop that screeched through the heavy speakers. Several guests in the front row winced and covered their ears, stepping back from the overwhelming noise. Marcus grimaced from the side of the stage, raising his hands to block the terrible sound. The screeching feedback violently shattered the delicate, sympathetic atmosphere Chloe had just tried so desperately to create. Chloe dropped her hand from my shoulder, her blue eyes widening in genuine alarm as the harsh sound completely drowned out her soft, gentle performance. I waited exactly 3 seconds for the screeching audio feedback to fade back into absolute dead silence before I spoke again. I turned my body slightly, ensuring the entire audience could see the fierce, unwavering determination burning in my dark eyes. Perfect marriage. I echoed my voice, slicing through the heavy tension of the silent room like a freshly sharpened razor blade. Are you absolutely sure about that, Chloe? Without breaking eye contact with my terrified sister-in-law, I raised my right hand and firmly pressed the silver button on my remote control. The massive glowing projector screen behind us instantly flickered. The highly detailed financial documents and bank routing numbers completely vanished into the dark. In their place, the screen brightly illuminated with crystal-clear high-definition security footage. The full-color time-stamped video began to play, displaying the interior of the private executive office at Apex. The pristine mahogany desk and the panoramic windows overlooking downtown Atlanta were unmistakable. What truly captured the attention of the entire room were the two figures tangled passionately together on the leather sofa: Marcus and Chloe. The visual evidence of their illicit affair was absolutely undeniable. I had tasked my private investigators to install hidden cameras in his office weeks ago, and the footage they captured was flawlessly clear. The elite club speakers immediately broadcast their voices across the cavernous ballroom. Chloe was laughing loudly on the video, her arms wrapped tightly around the neck of my husband. "Jamal is so clueless," Chloe said, her digital voice echoing off the walls. "He works 80-hour shifts at the hospital and he never notices a single thing I do. It is almost pathetic." The video continued to play, and their conversation shifted directly to me. I watched Marcus smile as Chloe began to viciously mock my appearance and my impending humiliation. "Shaving her head is an absolutely brilliant idea, baby," Chloe cooed, running her hands over his tailored suit. "She will look like a pathetic, ugly lab rat. She will be far too humiliated to ever leave the house again. And she will definitely sign over that $20 million startup fund just to keep you happy." Marcus laughed, kissing her deeply. "I will dump Kiara the second the transfer clears," Marcus promised on the video. "Then you can divorce Jamal and we can take the money and move to the Cayman Islands." The ballroom descended into absolute pandemonium. The wealthy elite investors gasped in collective horror. Women in expensive designer gowns covered their mouths, their eyes wide with profound shock. Beatrice, my mother-in-law, was still sitting on the wooden floor of the stage where she had collapsed earlier. She began to sob hysterically, realizing that her golden child had just ruined the Sterling family name permanently. Down in the front row, Jamal stood completely paralyzed. The brilliant orthopedic surgeon stared up at the massive screen, his brain struggling to process the devastating reality of his wife and his own brother plotting to destroy his life. The heavy crystal wine glass he was holding slipped slowly from his fingers. It hit the polished marble floor and shattered into dozens of glittering, jagged pieces. The sharp sound of breaking glass finally snapped Jamal out of his paralyzed trance. His face twisted into an expression of pure, unadulterated rage. He charged toward the stage, taking the wooden steps two at a time. A fast camera motion circled the chaotic, violent confrontation that erupted between the two brothers. Jamal lunged forward and grabbed his younger brother violently by the lapels of his custom navy tuxedo. He slammed Marcus forcefully backward against the heavy velvet curtains, causing the metal stage rigging to shake. "You slept with my wife," Jamal roared, his voice cracking with an agonizing mixture of fury and profound heartbreak. Marcus immediately tried to save himself, throwing his hands up in a desperate attempt to push Jamal away. It meant nothing. Marcus pleaded, his voice high and panicked. "She seduced me. She came to my office and threw herself at me. I was stressed about the massive company debt, and I made a stupid mistake." Down on the main floor, Chloe completely lost her mind. Her fake diplomatic peacemaker persona vanished instantly, replaced by sheer desperation. "You lying coward!" Chloe screamed at the stage, her face turning a blotchy, furious red. "You told me you loved me. You promised you were going to divorce Kiara today. You promised we were going to take her money and run away together." The elite, untouchable image of the Sterling family imploded in seconds. They were brawling and screaming like common thugs in front of the most powerful people in Atlanta. I stood a few feet away watching their pathetic display with a calm, steady gaze. I lifted the microphone back to my mouth. "Gentlemen," I announced, my voice projecting loudly and slicing right through their chaotic screaming match. "Please, let us not resort to physical violence over a woman who finances her entire personality with stolen corporate funds." Jamal froze, his hands still gripping the collar of Marcus tightly. He turned his head to look at me, his chest heaving heavily. I raised my arm and pointed a single steady finger directly at Chloe, who was standing below the stage, clutching her throat in panic. "That beautiful, sparkling Boucheron diamond necklace Chloe is wearing right now," I announced to the captive, stunned audience. "Jamal, you did not buy that for her. You have been working exhausting 80-hour weeks at the hospital saving lives. You did not have the time to go luxury jewelry shopping yesterday morning." I firmly pressed the button on my remote control. The scandalous security footage of the affair instantly vanished from the giant screen. In its place, a high-resolution certified credit card statement appeared. The official logo for Apex Sports Brokerage sat prominently at the very top of the page. I read the highlighted transaction aloud for everyone to hear. Boucheron, Atlanta. $80,000. Billed directly to the Apex Executive Corporate Account. Signed and completely authorized by Marcus Sterling. I looked down at the furious wealthy investors who were rapidly whispering. "Marcus used your investment capital to buy $80,000 diamond necklaces to keep his brother's wife quiet during their illicit affair." Jamal released his furious grip on Marcus. He backed away, turning to look down at his wife. The absolute disgust radiating from his eyes was incredibly palpable. He marched directly up to her, reaching out and violently ripping the heavy diamond necklace off her neck. The delicate clasp snapped loudly. "Do not leave just yet, Jamal," I said over the microphone. "This is only the tip of the iceberg regarding your personal financial involvement." The heavy gold chain of the Boucheron necklace hit the polished marble floor with a dull, heavy thud. The scattered diamonds caught the harsh glare of the stage lights, looking like cheap broken glass scattered around Chloe and her expensive silver gown. A slow dolly-out camera movement captures the absolute devastating scale of the ruin. The grand, cavernous country club ballroom, once filled with the arrogant chatter of the Atlanta elite, now feels like a massive, silent tomb. Wealthy investors are completely frozen in their seats. Beatrice is still weeping on the floor of the stage, her elite reputation entirely shattered. Jamal stands over his trembling wife, his broad chest heaving with every ragged breath he takes. He looks like a man who has just watched his entire world burn to ash. I did not feel a single ounce of joy as I looked down at Jamal. For 11 years, he had turned a blind eye to the way his mother and his brother treated me. He allowed his privileged white wife to hurl constant microaggressions at me at every family dinner. But unlike Marcus and Chloe, Jamal had actually worked for his success. He spent over a decade building a highly respected orthopedic surgery practice from the ground up. He saved lives, He did not deserve to be financially slaughtered by his own blood. I lowered the microphone slightly, my tone shifting from cold, calculating mockery to something deadly serious. Jamal, I said, making sure my voice was soft but firm enough to carry through the massive speakers. You thought your biggest problem tonight was a broken heart and a cheating wife. I am so incredibly sorry to be the one to tell you this, but a broken marriage is the absolute least of your concerns right now. Jamal slowly raised his head. The raw fury in his dark eyes was rapidly giving way to profound, terrifying confusion. He looked at me, then at the massive, glowing projector screen behind my back, and finally down at Marcus, who was still leaning heavily against the stage curtains, wiping a thick smear of dark blood from his split lip. I pressed the silver button on my remote control one more time. The screen flashed, replacing the damning corporate credit card statements with a highly detailed, scanned legal document. It was a massive commercial real estate deed, stamped heavily with the official red seal of the Fulton County Clerk. Jamal squinted up at the bright screen, his lips parting in absolute horror, as he recognized the address printed in bold black letters at the very top of the legal document. It was the exact address of his private medical practice, the state-of-the-art surgical facility he had spent his entire adult life building. Marcus and Chloe did not just need a little extra cash to buy shiny diamonds and book luxury hotel rooms for their illicit affair. I explained, my voice ringing out with absolute clarity. Marcus was drowning in $15 million of toxic corporate debt. He was completely desperate. He needed a massive, immediate injection of capital just to keep his fraudulent Ponzi scheme afloat, but his credit was entirely destroyed. No legitimate bank in the state of Georgia would lend him a single dime, so he had to find an asset that was completely clean, totally unencumbered, and highly valuable. Jamal shook his head violently, taking a staggering step backward. "No," Jamal whispered, his voice cracking with absolute disbelief. "No, that is impossible. The practice is solely in my name. I own the building outright." "You did own it outright," I corrected him gently. Until exactly 4 months ago, I pointed a perfectly manicured finger at the glowing screen highlighting the signature line at the very bottom of the extensive legal document. "Chloe is your legal wife, Jamal. She has full, unrestricted access to your personal financial records, your tax returns, and your private identification documents. Marcus is a licensed financial broker. He knows exactly how to manipulate the commercial lending system, bypass standard verification protocols, and fast-track a massive corporate loan." Chloe let out a loud, hysterical sob, burying her face in her hands. She tried to step toward Jamal, reaching out to grab his arm, but he violently jerked away from her as if her touch would burn his skin. Together, I announced to the silent, horrified ballroom, "Your brother and your wife conspired to completely bypass you. They forged your signature on every single page of this commercial lending agreement. They used your spotless medical practice as collateral to take out a massive $5 million second mortgage. And then they immediately funneled every single penny of that loan directly into the Apex corporate accounts to cover Marcus and his toxic gambling-related debts." The sheer, overwhelming magnitude of the financial betrayal hit Jamal like a physical blow. The air rushed out of his lungs in a sharp, agonizing gasp. The brilliant, highly respected surgeon, a man who commanded operating rooms with absolute authority, simply collapsed. Jamal dropped to his knees right there on the cold marble floor, his hands gripping his head as a guttural, heartbroken cry ripped through his chest. His entire life's work, his practice, his reputation, and his financial future had been entirely wiped out by the two people he trusted most in the world. The elite investors in the audience began shouting furiously. Several men pulled out their phones, aggressively dialing their lawyers. The Sterling family name was not just ruined, it was practically radioactive. Jamal looked up from the floor, his eyes completely bloodshot. He let out a furious, animalistic roar and lunged directly at the stage, ready to tear Marcus limb from limb. My security guards instantly moved forward, forming a solid, impenetrable wall to keep the violent physical brawl from spilling onto the stage. The two brothers were now completely at each other's throats, both legally and physically, their brotherhood entirely destroyed by greed. But then something incredibly disturbing happened. over the sounds of Jamal screaming and Chloe sobbing uncontrollably. A new sound echoed across the stage, Marcus still bleeding profusely from the heavy punch Jamal had delivered earlier. Slowly pushed himself off the heavy velvet curtains. He wiped the dark blood from his chin, looked directly up at me, standing in my crimson gown, and he suddenly started laughing. It was not a nervous, defeated chuckle. It was a dark, arrogant, deeply smug laugh that chilled me to the absolute bone. The laugh started low in his chest, a dark, vibrating sound that seemed entirely out of place in the middle of a destroyed ballroom. Marcus leaned his head back against the heavy velvet curtains and let the laugh bubble up his throat until it echoed loudly across the stage. The wealthy investors exchanged nervous glances, stepping further back from the chaotic scene. Down on the floor, Jamal slowly lifted his head, his tear-streaked face twisting into an expression of absolute disgust as he stared at his younger brother. Marcus pushed himself off the curtains, standing tall and straightening the lapels of his ruined custom tuxedo. He raised the back of his hand and casually wiped the thick streak of dark blood dripping from his split lip. He looked at the blood on his skin, smeared it between his fingers, and then looked directly up at me. The sheer panic that had paralyzed him just moments ago was completely gone. In its place was the monstrous, towering ego of a narcissistic man who firmly believed the world was built entirely for his benefit. "You really went all out for this performance," Kiara, Marcus said, his voice projecting clearly without a microphone. He took a slow, arrogant step toward the center of the stage. He did not look like a man who had just been exposed for federal fraud and sleeping with his brother's wife. He looked like a predator who had just spotted a fatal weakness in his prey. "I have to admit, I am genuinely impressed by your dramatic little presentation tonight. You gathered all these people, you pulled the financial records, and you even hired security. It is a fantastic show." Jamal pushed himself up from the marble floor, his fists clenched so tightly his knuckles were stark white. "You think this is a show?" Jamal roared, stepping toward the stage. "You forged my signature and destroyed my medical practice. You slept with my wife in your office." Marcus waved a dismissive hand at his older brother, not even bothering to look down at him. "Oh, grow up, Jamal," Marcus scoffed, rolling his dark eyes. "Yes, I slept with Chloe. She was bored with your endless hospital shifts and I was stressed about my company. It meant absolutely nothing to either of us. And yes, I took out a second mortgage on your little medical clinic because I needed liquid capital to cover a temporary cash flow problem. You are a brilliant surgeon, Jamal. You will easily bounce back and rebuild your practice. Stop acting like a dramatic victim in front of my investors." The sheer, unapologetic sociopathy of his statement sent a shockwave through the silent ballroom. He felt absolutely no remorse. He viewed the total destruction of his own brother as nothing more than a minor collateral inconvenience. Marcus finally turned his full attention entirely back to me. He stepped into the bright spotlight, his chest puffed out with absolute masculine entitlement. "But you, Kiara," Marcus continued, his voice dripping with condescension. "You made one catastrophic miscalculation tonight. You stood up here and proudly announced to the entire elite society of Atlanta that you secretly built a predictive data algorithm. You proudly showed everyone the Wall Street Journal article proving that Oracle just bought your little tech project for a staggering $20 million after taxes. You wanted to prove how incredibly smart you are. You wanted to prove that you do not need me." I stood perfectly still, holding my microphone loosely at my side, letting him dig his own grave. I watched his arrogant smile widen, revealing teeth stained slightly pink with his own blood. Marcus took another step forward, pointing a finger directly at my face. "But you are not as smart as you think you are," he mocked, his voice echoing loudly in the tense room. "Because you completely forgot the fundamental laws of the state of Georgia. You forgot that we have been legally married for 11 years, and most importantly, you forgot that we never signed a prenuptial agreement when we got married." Down on the main floor, Beatrice suddenly stopped her hysterical sobbing. The older woman wiped her smeared mascara, looking up at her son as his words finally registered in her panicked brain. Chloe also stopped crying, her blue eyes widening as she turned her attention back to the stage. Any income, any asset, and any massive corporate payout generated during the exact timeline of our legal marriage is considered community property, Marcus announced, spreading his arms wide like a victorious king. It does not matter if you hid in your home office and wrote the code all by yourself. It does not matter if you kept the patent a secret from me. Under the absolute strict letter of the law, half of everything you create belongs entirely to me. That $20 million payout is a marital asset, Kiara. A collective murmur swept through the crowd of wealthy investors. The men in the audience nodded slowly, recognizing the undeniable legal reality of his claim. The financial system was designed to protect men just like Marcus. He knew it, and he was weaponizing it right in front of my eyes. $10 million is more than enough to pay off my debts. Babe, Marcus sneered, his voice practically vibrating with arrogant triumph. $10 million instantly clears my immediate obligations to the banks, and it leaves me with plenty of capital to rebuild my brokerage firm. You thought you were executing a flawless financial murder tonight, but all you actually did was publicly secure my ultimate bailout. I am going to take half of your entire life's work. My lawyers will freeze your accounts tomorrow morning, and the family courts will hand me exactly what I am owed. So thank you, darling. Thank you for working so incredibly hard to save my company. The atmosphere in the ballroom shifted instantly. The heavy, crushing dread that had suffocated the Sterling family completely evaporated. Beatrice slowly pushed herself up from the wooden floor of the stage. She adjusted the torn fabric of her expensive designer gown and let out a breathless, relieved laugh. The matriarch realized her elite lifestyle was not over after all. Her son was going to legally strip me of my fortune and maintain their power. Down below the stage, Chloe actually smiled. The toxic white sister-in-law wiped her fake tears and crossed her arms, looking up at me with profound, smug satisfaction. They honestly believed the legal system had just swooped in to save their fraudulent empire. They thought they had backed me into an inescapable legal corner. I did not gasp. I did not flinch. I did not shed a single sad tear of frustration. I stood there under the bright, glaring stage lights, looking at the three of them celebrating their supposed victory. I let Marcus bask in the warm glow of his own narcissistic delusion for a few more seconds. I let him taste the absolute sweet certainty of his triumph. My expression remained completely unchanged, a mask of cold, impenetrable calm. I slowly lifted the heavy microphone back to my lips. The laugh started low in my chest, a slow, chilling sound that cut through the suffocating tension of the ballroom. I did not scream. I did not cry. I simply let that cold, unapologetic laugh echo across the stage, vibrating through the speakers, until it forced Marcus to drop his arrogant, triumphant smile. The camera angle pushed in tight on my face, capturing the moment my expression shifted from silent observation to terrifying control. I looked at the man who drugged me, shaved my head, and paraded me in front of Atlanta high society as a broken, hysterical prop. He honestly believed he just checkmated me with the laws of Georgia. He thought his greedy, desperate grasp on my $20 million fortune was secured by a marriage certificate. I raised the microphone, making sure every wealthy investor in the room hung on to my next words. "You are absolutely right about the buyout, Marcus," I announced, my voice slicing clearly through the dead silence. "I am the anonymous founder and sole developer of the Sentinel predictive data algorithm. And yes, last month, Oracle officially purchased my patent for exactly $20 million after taxes." The entire room gasped in unison. The elite men and women who spent the last decade ignoring me at dinner parties, treating me like a charity case who was lucky to marry a Sterling, were now staring at me in profound, unadulterated awe. I was not the uneducated college dropout they relentlessly mocked. I was a self-made tech multimillionaire who completely outsmarted every single one of them. Down on the stage floor, Beatrice suddenly scrambled to her feet. The realization of my massive fortune completely rewired her toxic brain in seconds. The same woman who just screamed into a microphone that I was a pathetic, unstable gold digger was now aggressively wiping her smeared makeup and forcing a wide, manic smile onto her face. "Oh, thank God!" Beatrice yelled, clasping her hands together as she stumbled toward me. Kiara, you saved us. You saved the Sterling family. You owe this to us. Marcus gave you a home when you had absolutely nothing. We took you in, we fed you, we gave you our prestigious name. You owe every single penny of that $20 million to this family for everything we have done for you. I turned my head and looked down at my mother-in-law. The sheer blinding audacity of her greed made my stomach turn. I owe you nothing, Beatrice, I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous register that made her freeze in her tracks. Let me tell you exactly what I did while you and your son were busy playing dress-up in your luxury cars and designer clothes. For 11 agonizing years, I played the role of the perfect, obedient, belittled housewife. I ironed his custom suits. I cooked his organic meals. I stood quietly in the back row of your fake family photos while you and Chloe hurled racist and classist insults at me under your breath. I let you call me stupid. I let you call me worthless. I let you tell the entire city of Atlanta that I was a failure. I took a step closer to the edge of the stage, looking out at the captivated audience. But while Marcus was out drinking expensive scotch and destroying his brokerage firm, I was awake at 3 o'clock in the morning. I sat in the dark, locked inside my home office, writing thousands of lines of complex code. I built a financial prediction model so advanced that the biggest technology company in the world paid me $20 million just to own it. I endured your psychological torture every single day because I knew my quiet, relentless focus was building an empire right under your arrogant noses. You did not give me a life, Beatrice. You gave me a prison, and I used every single second inside that prison to forge the key to my own absolute freedom. Marcus stepped forward, placing himself directly between me and his mother. He adjusted his ruined tuxedo jacket, his chest puffing out again as his narcissistic ego desperately tried to regain control of the narrative. That is a very touching story, Kiara, Marcus sneered, his dark eyes flashing with greedy anticipation. It really is a beautiful tale of female empowerment, but all the late nights and all the secret coding do not change the absolute reality of American marital law. We are legally married. We do not have a prenuptial agreement. Half of that $20 million belongs to me. You can stand up here and give as many feminist speeches as you want, but tomorrow morning, my lawyers will freeze your bank accounts and a judge will forcefully hand me my $10 million. So go ahead and take your little victory lap tonight. I will be taking my cash tomorrow. He crossed his arms, fully convinced that he held the ultimate winning hand. He thought the patriarchal legal system would effortlessly swoop in to save him from his own devastating financial ruin. He believed my money was simply waiting in a personal checking account, ready to be carved up and handed over to pay for his illicit affairs and his toxic corporate debt. I did not break eye contact with him. I did not show a single ounce of fear or hesitation. Instead, I slowly reached into my crimson designer clutch. I pulled out a sleek, heavy leather folder that my wealth manager Elias had couriered to me just hours before the gala. I unfastened the silver clasp and flipped the folder open. I looked at Marcus, letting a cold, triumphant smile spread across my face. "You are absolutely right about marital assets, Marcus," I said into the microphone. "But you are very, very wrong about where that money went." I pulled a crisp, thick stack of legal documents from the sleek leather folder and held them up high for the entire ballroom to see. The bright stage lights caught the heavy embossed gold seals of the state corporate registry. Marcus stared at the papers, his smug, confident smile faltering for just a fraction of a second. He was a financial broker, so he recognized official incorporation documents when he saw them, but his massive, arrogant ego simply refused to let him connect the devastating dots. "You really think a few pieces of paper are going to save you, Kiara?" Marcus scoffed, his voice dripping with condescending pity. "You can move your little tech payout into a separate checking account or a basic trust fund, but it does not matter. The family courts in this state are incredibly strict. A judge will take one look at the timeline of our marriage and immediately freeze every single asset you possess. You cannot hide $20 million from a divorce lawyer. I let out a soft, genuinely amused laugh and took a slow, deliberate step toward him. I am not hiding a single penny, Marcus, I said, my voice projecting clearly through the microphone. I am fully aware of how the legal system works, and I knew exactly what kind of greedy, desperate man I was dealing with. So I did not deposit my $20 million payout into a personal checking account. I did not put it into a standard trust fund. Instead, I used my newly acquired capital to officially establish a highly aggressive anonymous venture capital firm. Down on the main floor, Beatrice let out a loud, harsh bark of laughter. She pointed a shaking finger at me, her face twisted into a mask of pure, desperate malice. A venture capital firm! Beatrice shrieked, her voice cutting through the silent crowd. You are a complete fool. Corporate veils are pierced in divorce courts every single day. My son will hire the most ruthless, high-powered litigators in Atlanta. They will tear your little fake company apart piece by piece and hand Marcus his $10 million on a silver platter. Marcus nodded, his confidence fully returning as he crossed his arms over his chest. My mother is absolutely right, he sneered, taking a step closer to me. You tried to play a smart corporate game, but you are completely out of your depth. A judge will instantly recognize that your venture capital firm is just a personal shell company designed to hide marital assets. They will pierce the corporate veil before the week is over. You just wasted your time, and you are still going to have to cut me a massive check. I stood perfectly still, holding the microphone steady. I looked directly into his dark, arrogant eyes and delivered the fatal blow. They will not have to pierce the corporate veil, Marcus, I said, my voice dropping to a low, chilling register. Because my venture capital firm did not just quietly hold on to the money. We did not sit around waiting for your divorce lawyers to come knocking. We actively spent the money this very morning, the smug, confident smile on the face of Marcus vanished instantly. His arms dropped slowly to his sides, his eyebrows pulled together in sudden, terrifying confusion. You spent it, he echoed, his voice losing all of its loud, projecting power. What do you mean you spent it? I turned slightly to address the massive crowd of wealthy elite investors who were hanging on to my every single word. As I revealed to all of you earlier tonight, Marcus has been drowning in $15 million of highly toxic corporate debt, I announced, gesturing to the blank projector screen behind me. He owed millions to various commercial banks and ruthless private lenders who were rapidly losing their patience. Those banks knew his brokerage firm was a failing, fraudulent Ponzi scheme. They knew he was never going to pay them back. They considered his massive loans to be completely unrecoverable, dead weight on their balance sheets. I turned my full attention back to Marcus. My shadow fell over his trembling frame. So at exactly 8 o'clock this morning, my wealth manager Elias marched into every single one of your banks. He sat down with your highly frustrated lenders, and he made them an incredibly generous offer. My venture capital firm offered to buy up every single cent of your toxic $15 million debt. And because your banks were absolutely desperate to recover even a fraction of their lost capital, they gladly sold your entire debt portfolio to my firm for pennies on the dollar. Marcus staggered backward as if he had been violently physically struck in the chest. His breathing became shallow and erratic. His dark eyes darted wildly around the room, searching for an escape that did not exist. No, he gasped, his voice cracking with raw, unadulterated panic. No, you could not have done that. That is impossible. I took another step forward, closing the distance until I was standing merely inches away from his terrified, sweating face. I am not just your wife anymore, Marcus, I whispered into the microphone, ensuring the devastating reality echoed through the entire cavernous ballroom. I am the sole owner of your massive corporate debt. I am your absolute senior secured creditor. You do not get to demand $10 million in marital assets from me because you personally owe my venture capital firm $15 million. I literally own your entire financial existence. Every single asset, every car, every bank account, and every business contract attached to your name is now legally my property. I bought your life this morning, Marcus, and now I am going to completely liquidate it to the ground. Right now, the lawyers are finalizing the absolute seizure of every last penny you have to your miserable name. Enjoy the complete financial destruction you created for yourself, you monster. I did not wait for his desperate response. I turned my back on the massive projector screen and began a slow, deliberate descent down the wooden stairs of the stage. A smooth, continuous tracking shot follows my deliberate movements directly from the front. The lens captures my crimson gown flowing like liquid fire, keeping my completely bald head proudly centered in the frame. I walked directly toward the absolute ruined wreckage of my disgraced husband. The wealthy, stunned investors parted like the Red Sea, giving me a wide, clear path. Marcus was still frozen against the heavy velvet curtains, his chest heaving violently, his dark eyes blown wide with unadulterated terror. He finally realized that the helpless, submissive housewife he had abused for 11 years was actually the brilliant architect of his total and permanent annihilation. Before Marcus could even attempt to formulate a pathetic defense, a man in a sharp gray suit stepped seamlessly out from the shocked crowd. He had been quietly blending in with the elite guests all evening, simply waiting for my exact visual cue. He walked briskly up to Marcus, pulling a thick, heavy stack of legal documents from his leather briefcase. Marcus Sterling. The man announced, his voice carrying a crisp, professional authority that cut right through the heavy silence of the ballroom. You have been officially served. The man shoved the massive stack of papers directly into the trembling hands of my husband and immediately stepped back, melting right back into the crowd. Marcus looked down at the documents as if they were literally covered in flames. His hands shook so violently that the thick pages rattled loudly against each other. I closed the final few feet of distance between us until I was standing close enough to smell the stale, sour sweat of fear radiating from his custom tuxedo. What you are holding in your shaking hands. Marcus is an official. Notice of default and immediate asset seizure. I explained, making sure my voice projected clearly through my microphone so every single investor in the room could hear the exact terms of his ruin. Because my venture capital firm is your senior secured creditor, and because your commercial loans are currently in massive catastrophic default, I have the absolute legal right to bypass the standard bankruptcy courts entirely. I took profound satisfaction in watching his arrogant jaw tremble uncontrollably. I am foreclosing on everything, I announced, my voice ringing with cold, triumphant steel. Tomorrow morning, my legal team will officially seize total operational control of Apex Sports Brokerage. Your office doors will be padlocked by private security, your company servers will be completely wiped of your access, and your remaining employee payroll will be frozen pending a massive federal audit. But I did not stop there. I pointed a perfectly manicured finger directly at his chest. I am also immediately seizing your entire fleet of imported luxury cars to cover the outstanding interest penalties you owe me. The keys to your customized Porsche and your vintage Mercedes will be handed over to my asset recovery team before midnight tonight. Beatrice let out a loud, piercing shriek from the floor of the stage, where she was still awkwardly sitting. She scrambled desperately to her feet, her designer gown twisting awkwardly around her legs. "You cannot do this!" Beatrice screamed, her face turning a furious shade of purple. "You cannot just steal a man's entire life. This is completely illegal. You are a vindictive, bitter woman trying to ruin a legitimate business. A judge will throw this entire fraudulent scheme out of court by tomorrow afternoon." She marched toward me, waving her hands aggressively in the air, but she stopped dead in her tracks. When my private security guards took a single highly intimidating step forward, blocking her path, I did not even flinch at her desperate screaming. I simply turned my head and looked at my mother-in-law with a gaze so icy it could freeze boiling water. "It is not illegal, Beatrice," I corrected her, my tone dropping to a deadly serious whisper. "It is simply aggressive corporate finance. The exact same aggressive finance your son used to steal millions of dollars from these very investors standing around us tonight. And speaking of aggressive finance, I think you missed the absolute most important document in that thick stack of papers. I turned my attention back to Marcus, tapping my finger against the very top page he was holding with his white-knuckled grip. Marcus looked down at the top page, his dark eyes frantically scanning the bold legal print. He let out a sharp, agonizing gasp, his knees buckling slightly as the devastating reality finally hit him. I bought the primary mortgage on the Sterling family mansion this morning, I announced to the captive audience, my voice dripping with absolute undeniable power. The same luxurious mansion Marcus secretly remortgaged to pay off his toxic gambling debts. And because the mortgage is deeply in default, the bank gladly transferred the deed directly to my venture capital firm. I own the house, Marcus. I own the very ground you walk on. I own the... Beatrice gasped, clutching her throat in pure, unadulterated horror. Chloe, who was standing nearby, realized she was now completely homeless since Jamal had just thrown her out. "You cannot take our home," Beatrice wailed, her voice cracking with sheer panic. "The Sterling family has lived in that house for decades. You cannot throw us out onto the street like common criminals. We are respected members of this community." I looked at the woman who had spent 11 years making me feel completely worthless. I looked at the man who had shaved my head just 12 hours ago to break my spirit. I let a slow, dark smile spread across my face as I delivered the absolute final crushing blow to their elite fake high society lifestyle. "I already did, Beatrice," I said, my voice echoing smoothly through the high-tech sound system. "The eviction notice was filed with the county sheriff 3 hours ago, and it becomes legally effective at exactly 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. So I highly suggest you stop screaming at me and go home right now. You better start packing your fine china, because the locks will be changed." The thick stack of legal papers slipped directly through the trembling fingers of Marcus. They hit the wooden stage floor with a heavy, loud slap, scattering across the polished surface like a deck of losing cards. A tight two-shot camera angle captures the exact moment the final remaining shreds of his massive ego completely evaporate. In the left frame, Marcus is visibly shrinking his broad shoulders, collapsing inward as sheer absolute terror drains the last ounce of color from his face. In the right frame, I stand perfectly composed, an unbreakable pillar of absolute dominance in my flowing crimson gown. Marcus looked down at the scattered foreclosure notices and then slowly looked back up at me. His lower lip quivered uncontrollably. The tough, charismatic chief executive officer persona he had worn like a suit of armor for over a decade completely disintegrated right in front of my eyes. His knees buckled instantly. Marcus dropped heavily to the hard wooden floor of the stage, kneeling directly at my feet. He reached out with shaking hands, weakly grabbing the hem of my silk dress. "Kiara, please," he sobbed, his voice cracking with raw, pathetic desperation. "Please do not do this to me. We have been married for 11 years. I am your husband. I love you. I was just stressed and I made a terrible mistake. Please just give me another chance. I will do anything you want. I will go to rehab. I will go to counseling. Just please do not take my company and my home." The pathetic sound of his weeping echoed through the silent ballroom. Beatrice crawled over to him, wrapping her arms around his shaking shoulders and adding her own loud wailing to the pathetic chorus. They were both on their knees, begging the very woman they had spent a decade emotionally torturing. Down on the floor, Jamal watched his brother grovel with an expression of pure, icy disgust. Chloe was completely frozen, staring blankly at the stage, realizing her entire luxurious future had just been violently erased. I did not pull my dress away from his desperate grip. I simply looked down at him, feeling absolutely nothing but profound clarity. I slowly crouched down until my face was perfectly level with his. I brought the microphone close to my lips, ensuring my voice would be the only sound anyone in the room focused on. "You do not love me, Marcus," I said, my tone perfectly flat and devoid of any sympathy. "You love the control you thought you had over me. You love the money you thought you could steal from me. A man who loves his wife does not drug her tea in the middle of the night. A man who loves his wife does not violently shave her head while she is unconscious just to break her spirit and force her into financial submission. You are not crying right now because you feel genuine remorse. You are only crying because you finally got caught and you know you have absolutely no way out of this trap. Marcus squeezed his eyes shut, tears streaming down his face as he continued to desperately clutch the fabric of my dress. I will change, Kiara. He begged, his voice muffled and thick with panic. I swear to God I will change. I stood back up, towering over his kneeling form. It is far too late for apologies, Marcus, I announced, but there is something else you need to clearly understand tonight. Everything I have told you so far, the hostile takeover of your massive debt, the total liquidation of your sports brokerage firm, the immediate foreclosure of your luxury vehicles, and the eviction from the Sterling family mansion taking place tomorrow morning. All of that is simply business. All of that is just the standard civil penalty for defaulting on a massive commercial loan. Marcus abruptly stopped crying. He slowly opened his tear-filled eyes, looking up at me with fresh, renewed panic. He could clearly hear the dangerous shift in my tone. The wealthy investors in the audience leaned forward, holding their collective breath. Jamal stepped closer to the edge of the stage, his arms crossed over his chest, waiting eagerly for my next words. When you and Chloe forged the signature of Jamal to secure that fraudulent $5 million second mortgage, I continued pacing slowly around his kneeling body. You did not just borrow money from a local neighborhood lender. You aggressively bypassed standard verification protocols to secure a massive commercial loan from a major financial institution. You deliberately transmitted those fraudulent documents electronically across state lines. And you directly deposited those illegally obtained funds into a corporate bank account fully protected by the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. Marcus immediately let go of my dress. He shrank back, his hands pressing flat against the wooden floor to steady himself as his entire body began to violently shake. He was a licensed financial broker. He knew exactly what those specific legal terms meant. The blood drained so rapidly from his face that his skin took on a sickly grayish hue. You did not just lie to your brother Marcus, I said, my voice slicing through the heavy air like a perfectly aimed scalpel. You committed highly calculated, premeditated wire fraud against a federally insured bank. You engaged in a massive coordinated conspiracy to commit grand larceny. And those actions are not handled by a civil divorce court where you can negotiate a simple financial settlement. Those actions are aggressively prosecuted as severe federal crimes punishable by decades behind bars. Beatrice gasped loudly, covering her mouth with both hands as she looked back and forth between me and her trembling son. Chloe let out a terrified whimpering sound from the ballroom floor, taking a slow, shaky step backward toward the exit doors. They all knew exactly what I was saying. I was not just taking his money and his house, I was taking his absolute freedom. When I established my venture capital firm and officially bought your $15 million debt portfolio this morning, I took on all the legal responsibilities of a senior secured creditor. I whispered into the microphone, looking down at his absolutely shattered face. I bought your life, Marcus. And as the new legal owner of your corporate debt, I was legally and ethically obligated to immediately report all major financial irregularities directly to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. A tight two-shot camera angle captures the stark, devastating contrast between us. In one half of the frame stands Marcus. His chest heaves uncontrollably. The thick stack of foreclosure notices slips entirely from his sweaty, trembling fingers. The heavy legal documents flutter to the wooden stage floor like the dying leaves of his fraudulent empire. In the other half of the frame, I stand perfectly composed. My crimson gown drapes elegantly around my figure, and my bald head catches the bright stage lights like a crown of absolute authority. The sheer terror radiating from his dark eyes clashes violently with the impenetrable dominance shining in mine. The charismatic, untouchable chief executive officer persona he had weaponized against me for 11 long years is completely gone. In its place is nothing but a hollow, terrified shell of a man who finally realizes he is entirely out of moves. His legs simply give out. The expensive custom-tailored navy trousers hit the hard stage floor with a loud, heavy thud. Marcus drops completely to his knees right in front of the hundreds of elite investors he had spent years trying to impress. He abandons every single ounce of his toxic macho facade. He reaches out with shaking hands, grasping desperately at the smooth silk fabric of my dress. "Kiara, please," he begs, his voice cracking into a high-pitched, pathetic sob. "Please, you cannot do this to me. We have a history. I am your husband. I know I made mistakes, but I was under so much pressure. The business was failing and I was terrified of looking weak. I will do anything you ask. I will sign whatever you want me to sign. Just please do not take everything away from me. I will be ruined." The sound of his weeping echoes clearly across the cavernous country club ballroom. The wealthy African-American high society of Atlanta watches in absolute stunned silence as their former golden boy grovels on the floor. I do not pull my dress away from his frantic grip. I do not offer him a single shred of comfort. Instead, I slowly crouch down until my face is perfectly level with his tear-streaked, panicked face. I bring the microphone right up to my lips, ensuring that my voice will be the only sound anyone in the room focuses on. "You are already ruined, Marcus," I say, my tone dangerously soft and utterly devoid of any mercy. "But you are crying right now because you think losing your money and your fancy sports cars is the worst thing that is going to happen to you tonight. You think poverty is your ultimate punishment." I lean in closer so he can see the absolute unforgiving coldness in my eyes. "Seizing your assets, taking your company, taking your luxury vehicles, and evicting you from the Sterling family mansion tomorrow morning is just the civil penalty," I whisper into the microphone. "That is just standard corporate debt collection. But we both know that you and Chloe did not just default on a simple commercial loan. When you decided to drag your own brother into your fraudulent mess, you crossed a massive, dangerous legal line. You forged the signature of Jamal to secure a $5 million second mortgage on his private medical practice. You took those forged documents and you electronically transmitted them to a commercial lender based entirely out of state." Down on the main floor, Jamal crosses his arms over his chest, staring up at his brother with pure, unadulterated disgust. Chloe begins to hyperventilate, clutching her chest as the severe legal reality of her actions finally begins to dawn on her privileged, toxic mind. She realizes that because she actively participated in the forgery to fund her lavish lifestyle, she is legally considered a co-conspirator in a major federal crime. Beatrice drops her head into her hands, weeping loudly as she finally comprehends that her golden child is not just facing bankruptcy. He is facing decades inside a federal penitentiary. The elite investors whisper frantically to one another, stepping even further back from the stage, treating the Sterling family like a highly contagious disease. "You bypassed standard verification protocols, Marcus." I continue, my voice slicing through the heavy air like a scalpel. "You deliberately deposited those illegally obtained funds directly into a corporate bank account that is fully protected and monitored by the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. You did not just steal from your family. You did not just steal from these wealthy investors standing around us tonight. You actively engaged in a highly calculated, premeditated conspiracy to defraud the federal banking system." Marcus releases his grip on my dress. He shrinks back, his hands pressing flat against the wooden floor to steady his violently shaking body. The blood drains so rapidly from his face that his skin takes on a sickly, grayish hue. He is a licensed financial broker, so he knows exactly what those specific legal terms mean. He knows that the family courts cannot save him from this. He knows his elite social standing in Atlanta cannot protect him from the sheer crushing weight of the United States federal government. He looks up at me, his mouth opening and closing like a suffocating fish, but no words come out. He is completely, utterly paralyzed by the inescapable trap I have meticulously built around him. I stand back up, towering over his kneeling form. I look out at the horrified crowd, making sure they understand the absolute finality of his destruction. "Your greed blinded you, Marcus," I announce, my voice ringing out with triumphant steel. You thought you could abuse me, mock my intelligence, and use my hard-earned money to fund your illicit affairs and your criminal lifestyle. You thought the system was built to protect men like you, but you forgot that numbers do not lie and paper trails do not vanish. I did not just buy your toxic debt to leave you penniless. I bought it to ensure that you would face the absolute highest level of accountability possible. The panic in his eyes morphs into a dark, bottomless despair. He realizes that there is no negotiation, no plea deal, and no amount of begging that will change the outcome of this night. I look down at him one last time, delivering the final crushing blow that will permanently end his entire existence. Wire fraud is a federal offense, Marcus. And as the new owner of your debt, I was legally obligated to turn all irregularities over to the FBI. A wide cinematic shot currently captures the massive floor-to-ceiling glass windows of the Grand Country Club ballroom. The serene, dark Atlanta night outside is suddenly and violently illuminated by flashing red and blue lights. The shrill, piercing wail of police sirens shatters the remaining tense silence inside the venue. The massive, heavy oak doors at the main entrance suddenly burst open. Federal agents wearing dark tactical vests, emblazoned with the FBI logo, flood into the grand foyer, followed closely by uniformed local police officers. The elite wealthy investors, who had been standing around the stage in stunned silence, immediately scatter like frightened insects. The absolute last thing these high society financial elites want is to be caught anywhere near a major federal raid. Men in custom-tailored tuxedos aggressively push their way toward the emergency exits, leaving behind half-empty champagne glasses and overturned cocktail tables. Women in expensive designer gowns hike up their silk skirts and sprint toward the back kitchens, desperate to escape the flashing cameras of the local news vans that are undoubtedly pulling up right behind the police cruisers. I stand perfectly still on the stage, looking down at the absolute magnificent chaos erupting across the polished marble floor. Marcus stares at the federal agents pouring into his prestigious anniversary gala. His survival instinct finally overrides his paralyzing terror. He scrambles up from his knees, slipping awkwardly on the polished wooden floor of the stage. He abandons his mother, he abandons his mistress, and he abandons every single shred of dignity he has left in his fraudulent body. Marcus turns and makes a frantic, desperate dash toward the heavy velvet curtains, trying to reach the backstage service exit. But a man wearing heavy tactical gear steps directly out from the dark shadows of the soundboard. The federal agent lunges forward, tackling my husband violently to the hard stage floor. The heavy impact echoes loudly through my microphone. Marcus thrashes wildly, groveling and begging the officers to let him explain, but they swiftly force his arms behind his back. The sharp, distinct metallic click of heavy steel handcuffs locking securely around his wrists rings out with beautiful, absolute finality. They haul him roughly to his feet, pressing his face against the very projector screen that brightly displays his federal crimes. Down on the main floor, Chloe is hyperventilating. She watches the federal agents spread across the ballroom, securing the perimeter and completely blocking the main exits. She realizes she cannot run. Chloe immediately reverts to her ultimate toxic weapon. She bursts into loud theatrical sobs, grabbing the arm of a passing FBI agent. "Please, you have to believe me," Chloe cries out, her voice echoing through the rapidly emptying room. "I did not know anything about a forged commercial loan. Marcus manipulated me. He is a predator. I thought I was just signing standard tax documents for my husband. I am a victim here." She looks desperately toward Jamal, expecting her brilliant, successful husband to rush forward and use his elite status to shield her from the authorities. But Jamal does not rush to her defense. The respected orthopedic surgeon calmly steps forward and looks directly at the federal agent. "She is lying," Jamal announces, his voice completely devoid of any emotion. "She has full unrestricted access to our private banking portal. She knew exactly what she was signing." I will gladly provide your investigators with full access to my personal computer servers tomorrow morning to prove she was an active, willing participant in the total financial destruction of my medical practice. The agent nods, signaling for a female officer to step forward. The officer grabs Chloe by her slender arms, forcefully pulling her away from Jamal and locking heavy steel handcuffs around her wrists. Chloe screams in genuine, unadulterated terror as she is dragged away in her expensive silver gown. Beatrice is completely inconsolable. She lies flat on the stage floor, violently pounding her manicured fists against the wood. She is not crying for her son, who is currently being frog-marched out of the building by federal agents. She is not crying for the destruction of her family. She is crying for her obliterated reputation. The elite Sterling family name, the absolute most important thing in her entire toxic superficial world, is now permanently synonymous with federal wire fraud and massive public humiliation. I will be ruined in this city, Beatrice wails, her voice cracking into a raw, pathetic screech. My prestigious country club memberships, my exclusive charity boards, my entire social life is completely gone. How could you do this to us, Kiara? You evil, vicious monster. I look down at my mother-in-law, feeling absolutely no sympathy for the woman who spent 11 years trying to make me feel worthless. I stand tall and completely untouched by the aggressive, chaotic swarm of law enforcement officers securing the massive ballroom. My crimson silk gown remains perfectly pristine. My bare, bald head catches the flashing red and blue lights reflecting vibrantly through the massive floor-to-ceiling windows. I watch with profound, quiet satisfaction as the people who tortured me, isolated me, and relentlessly abused me are shoved roughly toward the heavy glass exit doors. A federal agent stands directly in front of my husband, staring him down with absolute, unyielding authority. The agent looks Marcus dead in his terrified, bloodshot eyes and begins reciting the words that mark the permanent end of his arrogant existence. You have the right to remain silent, the federal agent states loudly, his voice projecting over the sounds of Beatrice weeping on the floor. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you. The familiar legal phrases echo beautifully across the destroyed venue. Marcus lowers his ruined head, completely broken. My long, exhausting 11-year nightmare is finally officially over tonight. The flashing red and blue lights illuminated the ballroom, casting frantic shadows across the polished marble floor. I did not stay to watch the federal agents push my husband out the glass doors. The camera angle transitions into a smooth following shot, moving backward to stay perfectly in front of me as I turn my back on the ruined Sterling family. I walked slowly down the stage steps, my crimson gown trailing behind me like a victory banner. The chaotic sounds of my past life faded into a dull buzz. I could hear Beatrice wailing as an officer instructed her to step back. I could hear Chloe sobbing hysterically, begging Jamal for help. I could hear Marcus shouting my name, begging for a mercy he never shown me. I did not turn around. I simply kept walking forward toward my freedom. The wealthy investors and elite members of Atlanta high society parted instantly as I moved through the center of the ballroom. The people who spent 11 years looking down their noses at me now lowered their eyes. They stepped aside with profound, terrified reverence. They had just witnessed a masterclass in financial destruction and knew better than to stand in my way. A few women who used to whisper cruel jokes about my plain clothes now stared at me with undisguised awe. I did not smile at them. I did not acknowledge their sudden respect. Their validation meant absolutely nothing to me anymore. I did not execute this corporate takeover to win their approval. I did it to secure total independence. I pushed through the heavy oak doors of the country club and stepped out into the crisp Atlanta night air. The sudden quiet of the exterior courtyard was a stark contrast to the aggressive pandemonium unfolding inside. The valet rushed forward, his eyes wide as he glanced nervously at the line of police cruisers parked on the manicured lawn. He opened the door of my waiting black luxury town car. I paused before getting inside. I closed my eyes, taking a deep, grounding breath. The cool autumn wind brushed gently against my completely bare scalp. Just this morning, the feeling of the cold air on my shaved head sent a terrifying shockwave of panic through my chest. Marcus used steel clippers to violently strip away my hair because he believed my physical appearance was the source of my personal value. He thought making me feel ugly would make me weak. I reached up and rested my palm against my smooth, bare head. I let out a soft, genuine smile. The baldness was no longer a symbol of his cruel, narcissistic abuse. It was a crown of my own spectacular rebirth. It was the absolute, undeniable proof that I survived his psychological torture and emerged stronger, smarter, and infinitely more powerful than he could ever possibly comprehend. I lowered my hand, smoothed the silk fabric of my crimson dress, and slid gracefully into the spacious back seat of the town car. The heavy door clicked shut, sealing me in a sanctuary. My phone vibrated softly in the pocket of my gown. I pulled it out and answered the secure line. It was my wealth manager, Elias. His voice was bright, brisk, and brimming with profound professional satisfaction. "Good evening, Kiara," Elias said, the sound of typing echoing slightly in the background. I received the official confirmation from the asset recovery team. The operation was an absolute flawless success. The locks on the massive front doors of the Sterling family mansion have been completely changed. The private security team is standing guard on the front porch, and the local sheriff will be there at exactly 8 o'clock tomorrow morning to enforce the formal eviction notice against Beatrice. I leaned my head back against the soft leather seat, watching the flashing police lights fade into the distance as my driver smoothly pulled away from the country club. "And what exactly about the corporate assets?" I asked, my voice calm and completely relaxed. "Fully secured," Elias confirmed with a sharp, victorious tone. "The federal authorities have officially padlocked the main offices of Apex Sports Brokerage, pending their massive wire fraud investigation. Furthermore, our private towing company successfully seized all 3 imported luxury vehicles registered to your husband. The customized Porsche and the vintage Mercedes are sitting safely inside our private impound lot. Marcus has 0 access to any liquid capital, no corporate shelter, and 0 physical assets. You own everything." "Thank you, Elias," I said, feeling a deep sense of absolute permanent peace, finally washing over my body. I ended the call and let the phone drop softly onto the seat beside me. I looked out the tinted window as the vibrant, glowing skyline of downtown Atlanta rolled past. The city looked entirely different to me now. It was no longer a gilded cage, built by my abusive husband and his deeply toxic family. It was an open landscape of endless, beautiful possibilities. I had $20 million safely secured in a venture capital firm, a brilliant mind for predictive data architecture, and an entire lifetime ahead of me to build an empire on my own terms. The camera angle slowly shifts, moving from the dark window to position itself directly in front of me, perfectly matching the beautiful composition of the original opening shot. I look directly into the camera lens, my dark eyes shining with absolute, unbreakable power. My crimson gown glows in the dim light of the car. I offer one final knowing smile to the audience. They thought shaving my head would permanently strip me of my pride. They thought taking my hair would magically erase my profound intelligence, my relentless drive, and my incredible strength. But they forgot one very simple, incredibly dangerous truth about women like me. They forgot that a queen does not need hair to wear a crown. She just needs the brains underneath it to completely destroy those who underestimate her.